Hi everyone, so this is chapter 3.4, Operations with Radicals. This is my first video, so please be nice. So what is a radical? According to the worksheet that you guys received, a radical is a square, cube, or higher root, such as the square root of 4 equals to 2. Now, when you see this symbol, this is a radical. And when up to this point, you've only seen for example, square root of 4. You know what that means. What that means is that you're looking for a value such that when you multiply to itself 2 times, that will give you 4. So there are two answers for this. There's positive 2, right? Because 2 times 2 equals 4. And you could also have negative 2 because negative 2 times negative 2 also equals to 4. Okay, so now sometimes you might see a radical where you see that there's like a small 3 in the corner, like over here. What does that mean? Is that they're looking for a value so that when you multiply it to itself 3 times, you get the large number on the inside. So what number multiplies to itself 3 times that equals to 27? Well, that equals to 3. Okay, and so when you see this symbol, this particular little table thing, the square root symbol, as some people call it, well, this is called a radical symbol. Okay, now radicals can come in either entire radical or a mixed radical. So, for example, the example they provide us is the square root of 12. Now, this is called a entire radical because you don't really see, you see that the entire number is underneath this uh, this 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 radical symbol. Okay, and what is a mixed radical? Well, mixed radical is when you have a radical, but the first value in front of it has like a coefficient that is not equal to 1. So how are they different? Well, with the entire radical, there is a 1, right? There's an invisible 1 that is in front of it, and that's why we don't write that. No one writes 1 times whatever. They just write that particular value. So with a mixed radical, that first value, that coefficient, that is equal to not 1. Okay? The second thing that this worksheet wants you to be aware of is how to convert from one form to the other. Now, they're saying that the square root of 12 and 2 times square root of 3 are actually the same value. And the way we can verify if that is true is, well, you can use a calculator. Okay, so right now, take your calculator and punch in square root of 12. And when you do that, you will get 3.4641101, like bunch of numbers. So let's just say 3.46. So let's remember that for a moment. Okay. What happens if, let's say, on this worksheet, we want 2 times square root of 3. So let's see what that value is. We take 3. Let's square root that. Okay. And then we got to times that by 2. So that, yeah, so this, the two values that we just evaluated using our calculator, they happen to be the same thing. So I guess this calculator verification is kind of like, in a way, showing you that these two are actually the same thing. Now, we want to show you how you can go from one form to the other. How do you go from an entire radical and turn that into a mixed radical? Okay, so for the first way, okay, what happened here? Okay, let's erase that. Uh, Square root of 12, okay, can be broken down into two values, right? So the way that I do it is that I always try to think of what perfect square number can I break this 12 into. So you can do, like, for example, well, 2 times 6 I would not choose that because 2 is not a perfect square and neither is 6. And so when we square root it, that we will not get a nice whole number. Okay, so what other number multiplies to 12 and one of them is a perfect square? Well, we can do what? 4 times 3. So what I'm going to do is, using this radical number or radical symbol, I'm going to write that 12. I'm going to turn that into 4 times 3. Okay, and at this point, what I can also do now is, well, if they're both they're being multiplied together and there's a square root within them, I can kind of break them up into square root of 4 times square root of 3. And finally, well, what is the square root of 4? That is plus or minus 2 times square root of 3. Okay. The one thing about this worksheet is that it doesn't look like they take into consideration the negatives, but that is actually something that you should definitely include when you are doing questions like this. Okay, so please don't forget that when you square root something, there's a plus and there's also a negative. Now, let's try going the other way. So let's say I have 2 times square root of 3. Okay, so that's when I'm starting with the mixed radical, and I want to turn it into an entire radical. So how do I do this? Well, this way is actually easier. What you're really doing is kind of like the reverse of what we just did. Okay, so 2 is my whole number here. Okay, and I want to turn that into a square root. So how do we turn that into square root? Well, we know that 4 square root of 4 is equal to 2. So I'm going to write that to replace the 2. And because, well, both of them are radicals and are being multiplied to each other, I can combine them. So that becomes 4 times 3. And so that gives me square root of 12. Okay, so so that's pretty much how we go from one form to the other. This is a very simplistic example. So let's go to the next one and try to express each of the following as entire radicals. So now notice that both of these questions, you're starting from a mixed radical. Okay, so from a mixed radical, how do you go to an entire radical? Well, we can just go back to this example right here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is take this 14 and express that as as a radical. So what value, right, when you square root it will give you 4? Well, that will be 16. So I'm going to change this 4 into root of 16. And this root of 5, well, we don't touch that yet. Okay. Now, what I can say is that because we're multiplying these two square root values, we can combine them, and so that becomes 16 times 5, and that will give me 80, square root of 80. So square root of 80 is the entire radical expression for part A. Now, are the rules any different if, let's say, my coefficient outside of the radical thing, that is a negative? Are my rules any different? Not really, because, well, think of it this way. What value, how do we turn this negative 16 into a whole radical or entire radical, is that we can use 36, because I know that the square root of 36 is both positive 6 and negative 6. So that doesn't really matter. You're just really squaring that first coefficient to get the 36. Okay, and then the root 3. Oh, I'm touching something that is not. Yeah, okay, there we go. So now we're going to keep the radical and multiply the 36 with 3, and that will give me 108. Okay, so That's how you will change from a mixed radical to an entire radical.